Good afternoon, everybody. As people start to trickle in through the registration, we're going to begin today, as we have all 4 days, with the promotional video that really frames the conversation for today.
Cities across Canada are looking for smart solutions to our housing affordability crisis. Hiding in plain sight is a generational opportunity to add missing middle housing to our residential neighborhoods as an alternative to condo buildings, or relying on environmentally harmful urban sprawl to provide large family homes. Potentially the fastest, least disruptive, and most cost-effective type of missing middle housing is at the smaller scale, adding one or more units to an existing single-family house and its yard. These types of homes are becoming more familiar in our neighborhoods. Garden suites, laneway homes, adding suites within the house, or dividing a house into multiple units. Our residential neighborhoods, made up mostly of single-family houses, occupy the majority of land in our city regions, offering great capacity to add new housing supply quickly to areas where we already have roads, transit, schools and health clinics, many other services and local businesses, and walkable communities. A recent study by the Urban Land Institute estimates that adding one unit to 15% of houses in Toronto would be equal to adding at least 100 condo towers. The question is, can this type of housing supply help with affordability and equity? Many municipalities are already rolling out these programs, including Toronto, but early evidence indicates that these programs are not generating affordable housing, but rather homes that are at market rate, great for more housing supply, but not necessarily for affordability. In some cities, where these programs have been in place for a few years now, the uptake by homeowners has been disappointingly low, even at market rate. House conversions and laneway houses are costly, and the process is onerous to navigate. So how can we design better programs and policies to deliver affordable units? For instance, can we reduce the costs of construction with, well, less construction? Instead of completely gutting houses and rebuilding them, can we develop pre-approved plans to add suites to the existing dwelling or replicable backyard homes and scale a renovation revolution? Can we create a municipal one-stop shop that provides everything the homeowner needs, from a local labor pool to innovative financial tools and a barrier-free process? Can the National Housing Strategy help roll out pilot projects in Canadian cities to encourage uptake and test new programs that benefit homeowners while yielding affordable units? Can we ensure that these programs are equitable and truly inclusive? Join the School of Cities, City Building TMU, and ULI Toronto for a 4-part webinar series to explore these and other solutions to create an affordable renovation revolution. Learn more and sign up for the series at affordablemissingmiddle.ca.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to day 4 of our 4-part series of how to put the affordable in the missing middle. My name is Richard Joy, Executive Director of ULI Toronto, the Urban Land Institute. And as mentioned, this is day 4 of our series, curated by the U of T School of Cities, City Building TMU, that's Toronto Metropolitan University, of course. And we are all together collectively proud to put this series on our platform to attract many of our members and the constituencies of the 2 universities. Before we get into this, as always, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto region-based organization, we acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands virtually today of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. we're all treated people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation and generations past, ULI Toronto stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. We also like to acknowledge and honor those who've come here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those brought here through enslavement. To better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, we would recommend 4 programs that we've uploaded to YouTube, and these links will be available in the chat. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Cheryl Case, founder and director of CP Planning, who will be the webinar moderator this afternoon. Cheryl's bio and that of our other speakers will be included in the chat to be efficient with our short 1 hour. And before I hand it over to Cheryl, I want to make a note to our audience that ULI is a nonpartisan organization, and we do not advocate on public policy pro or con. We frequently, though, take a critical look at the public policy landscape in the context of advancing our global mission. With respect to Q questions, we are encouraging our audience, as in the past days, to include your questions in the Q&A. We will do our very best to get to them toward the end of the program, which my colleague Thamina Curtis will moderate. If we don't get to them, they're still really important because there is a follow-up report that the University of Toronto School of Cities will be writing, and those questions will be considered in that report and might be answered in that context as well. So please, I encourage you to put your questions in, and also the thumbs up to vote up the questions that you feel you most want to have answered if we can live today. So Cheryl, with that, I'm really pleased to hand it over to you, a good colleague of many years. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's a great honor to moderate this panel. Missing middle is a topic that we've seen grow from quiet whispers to a roar, just in the level of interest to explore what is possible in these spaces. So I have the honor of introducing the panelists. We have Chisandra Kern, founder of Office and Office. This is in California in the United States. From the United States, we also have Sherry Taylor, interim executive director of Durham Community Land Trust in North Carolina, not Ontario. And we also are graced by Paul Lukowski, principal planner at the Housing Policy of the Region of Peel. So each of our esteemed guests today will be providing a 5-minute presentation where they'll be answering the questions of how did your solution come to be, and they'll provide an overview of how this program works and a summary of how their work impacts, summary of some of the impact their work has seen and generated through its implementation. So with this, we'll begin with Paul.
Thank you, and it's great to be here today, and thank you to everyone who was able to come today. 1 second. So my name is Paul Lukwich, and I am a principal planner in housing policy at the Region of Peel. Municipalities recognize the need for more missing middle housing, both from a built form perspective, but also from an income perspective, in terms of providing housing that's affordable to middle income households. And you can go to the second slide, please. Many municipalities have official plan policies that encourage a range and mix of housing options, including missing middle housing. I just hope to provide some highlights of some important initiatives and policies that we have. So in Peel, but in other municipalities as well, there are housing targets for large and new developments on affordability, rental, and density. And applicants are required to complete a housing assessment to demonstrate contributions to these housing targets. So that includes demonstrating ways that they are providing more, in some cases, missing middle housing, but also housing that's affordable. Official plan policies direct permissions for additional residential units, sometimes known by the acronym as ARUs, but also sometimes referred to as second units or second suites or additional dwelling units. And we recently had provincial legislation in Ontario, Bill 23, that now makes ARUs as of right up to 3 units per lot in many existing residential areas. Municipalities consistently review opportunities in new developments for rental and ARUs in detached or semi-detached or townhomes, but also other types of missing middle housing, but also looking at having the option of rough-ins for ARUs, and larger basement windows or separate entrances, and including ARUs as part of pre-construction sales. Many municipalities have registration or licensing processes in place to ensure adequacy of additional residential units, including for residents, including marginalized groups, and this as well as missing middle housing. And we're starting to see more of this. And this helps to set clear rules and guidelines and expectations about what is possible and where. And so many of these processes exist, and some examples are Brampton, Mississauga, and Toronto. Municipalities consistently review our processes and policies to minimize unintended barriers that could slow down or disincent affordable missing middle housing. This could be through reviewing process requirements or zoning bylaw standards, as well as simplifying the approval process and fees. I'm going to give some examples of some policies and initiatives that help to do this. So for instance, the city of Mississauga has a Making Room for the Missing Middle strategy that has specific goals and actions to create more housing that's affordable to middle-income households. And such examples could be through creating a more supportive policy environment, as well as encouraging additional residential units. The city also has an Increasing Housing Choices in Neighborhoods study that's trying to find ways for gentle density and zoning that supports innovative ground-related housing types and housing options that are more affordable to middle-income households. This includes exploring opportunities and permissions for garden suites and garage conversions, but also making sure that factors such as scale and height, entrances, parking, landscaping are factored and considered. The City of Toronto has something similar through its Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods initiative that seeks to put forward directions and amendments to policies to permit more missing middle housing, such as duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. And they actually have a pilot project in the eastern part of the city that explores financial feasibility and design options on city-owned land to facilitate missing middle development. To help make affordable housing more feasible for middle-income families, municipalities look at ways of reducing the cost of building housing. And one of the recent ways that has been looked at is through reduced parking requirements for certain kinds of developments. For instance, transit station area, developments in transit station areas or intensification corridors. Toronto and Mississauga have done this, and Brampton is exploring the same, just some examples in Ontario. This saves costs for development in areas where there may not be as much of a demand for parking due to the reduced use of automobiles. Municipalities also have official plan policies that focus on planning for diverse populations and housing needs, which is important when we think of marginalized populations. This includes universal accessibility features in existing and new residential developments that make sure there's alignment with requirements in provincial legislation. Municipalities consistently measure how we are doing on housing targets, how much supply is being built and how affordable it is, how much rental is being maintained and expanded. And we monitor activities to make sure that priorities and implementation plans on an ongoing basis are aligned with the changing housing needs of our populations that we serve. We regularly seek ways to enhance data and consistently measure any affordability gaps. Last but certainly not least, we continuously advocate to the provincial and federal governments for sufficient and predictable funding and additional financial incentives for affordable housing and innovative housing options, which includes missing middle housing. We've had a lot of recent provincial legislation, but also some federal initiatives announced, and we stress the importance of making sure that municipalities have the policy levers and the funding tools that are needed to support housing options that are truly affordable, while making sure that we plan for infrastructure and services for growth. Thank you, and happy to speak more as we get into the conversation.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really was thrilled to hear about strategies that are taking place in Peel region. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, Sherry Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. Okay, great. All right, so greetings from Durham, North Carolina, down south, as we call it. And I have the pleasure of telling you about our CLT+1 program. Durham Community Land Trustees is a land trust that offers permanently affordable for sale housing, and also we have a sizable rental portfolio. And so our rentals are typically single family homes and duplexes. And that's exactly where you can build an ADU right now. Unlike many other places, Durham has only had this ADU legislation for about 3 years. So we're in our infancy. But with this program, what we're trying to do is innovate the community land trust model of homeownership. It really increase affordability. In our city, real estate prices have skyrocketed, and so has rents, even during COVID. And so we're realizing that we have to do more with what we already have. So that is the reason we thought up CLT+1. We've been working on this program for about 2 years, and it's really to do more infill housing. So the first phase of this was to really think about a new construction home with an attached ADU. Back in the summer of 21, we held a 2-day real estate conference just on affordable ADUs. And we learned a lot from our friends on the West Coast who have been doing this a lot longer than we have. And we found that an attached ADU was going to be the route that we wanted to go. And so I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. But we do have some vacant lots where we're building this opportunity. And we're doing that so that a lower moderate income person actually buys their home, but they have this ADU and they'll receive the rental proceeds, and it'll help them build wealth over time. And so we're thinking about a couple of things. We're thinking about additional rental housing. We're thinking about wealth building. We're thinking about a way to expand the purchasing power of our buyers in a market that's constantly shifting. And with interest rates going up, we think this is a great idea as well to kind of mitigate some of those issues. The second phase of the program is to build ADUs behind rental properties that we already own. And so that's single family homes and duplexes. We've started on that. And then this third phase will be offering to build ADUs behind our current CLT homeowners. So this is the Linwood. This is the custom home that we had designed in concert with the community. We took on a 8-month design process to make sure that this home could be a model that we could use again, but also that one that folks would actually want in their community. And so it is fully accessible on the first floor, and the ADU is also accessible. That was really important to us because our homeowners tend to age in place. And so we want to give them flexibility options with that. With this program, we think it's really important for our organization to support the homeowner and provide property management for the ADU, so they won't become a landlord and a first-time home buyer in the same transaction. We'll continue to support them with that. And here is our kind of limits for the rental and the home buyer. I wanted to mention too that we are building behind our rental properties. And this is a special project. It's supportive housing for veterans, where we're building ADUs behind homes that we already own. And this is special because we have 5 properties that adjoin. And we can use that acreage to provide more amenities for the veterans that are going to be living here. To do that in the most economic way, we're going to be using shipping containers, and we have a design build firm called Maker Studio out of Atlanta that is helping us with this project. They're going to be 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. And with that, thank you very much for having me. I'll be happy to answer more questions later in the program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sherry. So we thought of ADUs as accessory dwelling units, but also we have attached dwelling units. So our next speaker, we have Chaz Kern. Chaz Kern.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Chaz Kern. I'm a co-founder and director of Office of Office, an urban planning and design practice based in Los Angeles. And we believe centering community knowledge and leadership is foundational to creating a just built environment. Next slide, please. So Office of Office was formed out of a restructuring with LA Moss in 2021 by previous team members. We now exist as 2 separate organizations. So LA Moss as a community-based organization and Office of as a design organization, where LA Moss's past and present design work now lives on. And so today I'm going to be sharing about our housing work, specifically the Backyard Homes Project, which is the affordable ADU initiative that's emerged alongside changing ADU policy in Los Angeles and in alignment with resident identified goals. Next slide. So when progressive state policy was passed in 2017 in California, it became easier to permit an ADU and for 500,000 single family lots to become part of the affordable housing solution. So we began our work in ADUs with the City of LA pilot project in partnership with the Mayor's Innovation team to demonstrate the implementation of the new missing middle housing policy in LA. And through the project, we were able to help inform the permitting process and also test a new ADU financing product at that time. But it became really clear that many homeowners still face barriers to building in their backyard due to lack of access for financing options, lack of resources. Next slide. So from 2017 to 2018, we held a series of focus groups and convened an advisory committee to understand the barriers homeowners faced, how they could be supported, and what it would take for ADUs to become part of the affordable housing solution. So we spoke to over 100 homeowners, as well as housing experts, financing, government, and this was made possible by a HUD Section 4 capacity building grant from the Los Angeles Local Initiative Support Corporation. And from these conversations, we heard that homeowners wanted access to construction financing, financing and technical assistance navigating the design, permitting, and building process, and then also support and education about taking on the responsibilities for being a landlord. So the Backyard Homes Project, which was initiated by LA Moss and now led by Office of, was developed to explore the viability of ADUs as an affordable housing option. And it was designed to help homeowners build affordable rental units in their backyard by offering a one-stop shop to help them design, and finance, and build, permit, and tenant match an ADU. Next slide. So in exchange for the support, homeowners committed to renting to a Section 8 tenant for a minimum of 5 years. And the Section 8 program in California is a very long wait list. It has a limited number of vouchers granted, and there's a low housing stock available for these rental type. And it's common for these vouchers to be forfeited when a unit can't be located. So the focus on Section 8, we were able to tap into an existing program and understand the potential of ADUs as a typology for a specific tenant, for this specific tenant. Each of the process, each step is supported by a program partner, as all of them are present here. And this includes housing providers who were able to match tenants to units and provide them with supportive services as they were kind of moving into the units themselves. Next slide, please. So any property owner in the city of LA could apply for the program and go through the process to build a unit with us. A financial product was designed to support low to moderate income homeowners to develop a low income rental unit. And a new cash out refinance loan factored in the future value of the ADU and then the expected income through the Section 8 voucher program. So we launched the program in 2017 as a pilot to test the affordable housing model for about 4 to 6 homeowners. And we moved forward with 5 participants. We began permitting right before the COVID pandemic, and we were challenged by rising construction costs, permitting delays. Our building department was changing from in-person to remote, and there were economic conditions that were changing for the homeowners. So as of today, we've moved in 3 tenants into completed ADUs. Next slide. And our aim for the program was really to promote stability for housing insecure tenants while supporting homeowners and earning reliable income from their new rental unit. And we have a lot of learning lessons. We were able to push the envelope around how a wraparound program to open the door for people who were previously unable to qualify for financing and participating in AD development, or for those who really needed that guided support to get through the process. But the reality is that it's very challenging still for low to moderate income homeowners to access the financing needed to build an ADU. Next slide. And the ability to do this type of construction, it's uneven, it's difficult, it's expensive, and we're asking homeowners to take on the level of knowledge as a developer in order to navigate the residential development process. And the systems need to be accessible and affordable and underpinned by a local network. So in California, as we're rolling out new incentive programs to accelerate production of ADUs and other small scale housing, SB 9, at Office of, we're really hoping to nurture this framework for knowledge sharing between city officials and community members and housing experts to establish really clear commitments to equity that support housing access to all residents. And I'm happy to get into more of specifics of the program if you have any questions, but thank you.
Amazing. I just want to acknowledge that we're on time. Not often will you find folks, be asked to make a short presentation, and you'll get short presentation. So definitely we have a really great group of experts here. So we're going to jump now into the question and answer period of this panel session. So my first question is, how have you generated financial support to carry out this work, be it municipal, state, or federal policies, or from financial institutions like banks, credit unions, and or other sources? So Chaz, you were speaking about this in your presentation, so I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to dive a bit deeper into, those are your partners that you have that beautiful graph. So how do you actually go about securing those financial partners?
Sure. So there's a few scales of like financial investment that we kind of frame the work around. So partners invested in developing the framework and sort of what sort of financial need is needed for that. We have partners who throughout the program for the last 5 to 6 years who have provided free technical assistance and operating the program itself. And then also the products to which homeowners access to develop the ADU. So for the program development as a whole and how it's operated, we were able to get that HUD Section 4 grants and a lot of support from Wells Fargo around program development. I think that one of the key factors around the program and how it worked for homeowners was developing a neighborhood scale affordable housing program that sought alternative funding sources from multifamily development. And what I mean by that is low income housing tax credits to kind of see what it might be scaled at if it were a 1 to 2 unit on a single family lot. So that's why we kind of went into the realm of a cash out refinance that was developed for homeowners who at that time were investing in the development of the unit itself. And 5 to 6 years ago, there wasn't as many opportunities on the table around free money for homeowners at that time, and that's why it was set up that way. And so Genesis LA and JP Morgan Chase were able to kind of develop a guarantee around this financial product and Self-Help Federal Credit Union as a CDFI to support homeowners through the loan program.
Amazing. Sherry, in the Durham Community Land Trust, were you also able to get some creative programs developed specifically for supporting the work that you're doing?
Well, as I mentioned, this is, what we have is more, we're in our infancy stage for the industry in Durham and in North Carolina overall. So the route that we went is that, we just looked for partnerships in our supporters. And so we also have had support from Wells Fargo and Volunteers of American National Services to develop these programs. But, we really, and I forgot to mention NeighborWorks America, of course, but we really wrote specific grants to get the project started. and to support construction activity. And I think as more and more nonprofits, especially in our state or on the East Coast, start to look at ADUs as a viable source of affordable housing, then that municipal and federal support will follow. But at this point, it's more just proving that the concept works.
Thank you so much. So, hearing from you both, it sounds like the government is a really important part. You have all the different partnerships, but then the grants is also incredibly important. So Paul, as a member of municipal government, I would love to hear from you around how do we get those funds flowing to folks who are looking to build affordable housing, and how are you able to draw from other levels of government to provide that support?
Great question, and thanks for the question. There is a number of municipal initiatives already in place that provide some funding to individual homeowners or to incentives to create more affordable housing. And so one example in Peel, for instance, is we have a My Home second unit renovation program, and it provides up to $30,000 in a forgivable loan for homeowners to renovate an existing second unit in their home to make sure it's up to code. So I saw a question in the chat about providing more housing options, more the mom and pop, so to speak. So this is on a smaller scale, the ability to provide those second units. And there are incentives also to make sure that it's affordable, and for those who are in need of affordable housing can secure a unit. And when we think about, I saw another question, sorry, just in terms of about extended family and multi-generational. We know that we have many parts of Ontario, specifically in the Greater Toronto Area, that have many high number of multi-generational households. And so this provides an opportunity for families to have a caregiver in the second unit, to have grandparents who provide childcare, or to have it as a rental property for someone to access another valuable rental piece. We also have, and others do as well, affordable rental incentives program. So it's not focused necessarily on the missing middle form, but it's to help middle income households by securing units that are affordable to them through private or nonprofit developments with a focus on larger family-sized units. And so we have agreements there that to make sure that the affordability period is a minimum of 25 years. And the city of Brampton has a capital project that provides funding to nonprofits to incentivize new ideas. And this includes funding for housing for first-time buyers and marginalized groups, but also missing middle infill housing. And another one I wanted to highlight that isn't specific to ARUs, but the region of Peel recently provided a $2.5 million grant to Black North Home Ownership Bridge program. And so what this will do is provide funding to renter Peel households and provide them with the opportunity for home ownership by helping to fill the gap between the cost of a home and what the family can afford as a mortgage. And so this addresses the fact that we know that marginalized groups are overrepresented in the rental market in many areas as compared to homeowners, and do face barriers to eligibility and lack of affordability. And we know that housing affordability is an issue. So these initiatives try to support that.
That's amazing, Paul. You spoke towards many vulnerable communities that your work is supporting. So you mentioned Black communities, people with larger families, also renters. How is it that the region reaches out to those communities so that they're able to benefit from these programs?
Sure, absolutely. So we work, and many municipalities have a network of organizations who advocate for tenants, for homeowners across the spectrum, but also we have individual residents that we work with, diverse residents who are from many marginalized communities, and it's a constant consistent effort to try to understand what are the housing barriers, but also what are the changing housing needs. And we know that with the changes in the market, but also new types of housing, and trying to identify opportunities to address those barriers. So we definitely, at municipalities, we serve everyone, and so we know we have the population, which includes marginalized groups, but we make a concerted effort to reach out to those groups, but also to the organizations and advocacy groups and industry who try to address their concerns.
Thank you, Paul. So it's my understanding that Office of Office, one of your primary groups that you're looking to support are racialized communities. If you can just confirm that for me, Chaz?
Yes.
Yes. So I would love to learn more about why you decided to focus on those demographics, in particular, racialized homeowners and building affordable housing with them. And what have you seen as the impacts of prioritizing this community in your work?
Yeah, so residents in LA have long adapted their homes to house family and friends and neighbor, and it's been this informal practice that really represents an avenue of economic stability, as well as like an expression of social resilience for communities throughout our city. And I think that for homeowners in LA, when we were doing kind of that pilot project with the city, we were seeing a gap in who was participating in like the by right policy of ADU development. And we had focused our program development around supporting marginalized communities in Los Angeles who were homeowners who had the assets of home ownership, but maybe not the equity needed to invest during that time. And so a lot of our programming and the way that we met people or did outreach really spoke to meeting people where they were, because we were thinking about, in terms of who the program is for and homeowners in Los Angeles, we thought about how they normally access information and where they were, if the language that we were using was accessible, and if the visual was getting the key message and what we were signaling from that. So there's kind of this spectrum of readiness around AD development that we think of when we're engaging different like community members who go from like, I really don't know what this unit is, I think I want an ADU, to I really know that I do want to build something. And that's kind of intersected with this idea of, does somebody have immediate access to financing, or is there support needed to be able to capacity build? And so our program, as kind of that wraparound service, also is founded in being able to provide like any sort of level of education for folks who wanted to build a unit. So if it was really important to us, if to know if our program is right for them, or to be able to share the amount of resources or information that we had to other networks who were building ADUs, to see if that was a right fit for them. So that was one of the things we also focused on, was like resident education around what the best approach was for somebody who might not wanted to rent to Section 8, but maybe wanted to house family, and what sort of support network and community-based organizations could help with building those units for them.
Amazing. Yeah, I see a lot of alignment actually with the work that Office of Office is doing with your program and what Partner is looking to do. So Partner is a affordable housing development financing organization that's looking to support racialized folks in particular to build affordable housing. And we want to focus on helping folks to keep their family in their neighborhoods, but then also marginalized folks, lower income folks in general, to have access to affordable housing. So that piece around educating folks and getting them from the idea and moving forward is really great to see that success has happened in Los Angeles. So Sherry, so communal land trusts in the Toronto region are kind of having a moment right now. A lot of folks are exploring community land trusts. So in that space of community land trusts, there's always a discussion around, once they meet their existing housing supply, or once they attain affordable housing supply, will they just stay there and not actually pursue to grow their supply of housing? And so would really love to hear from you. How did you reach out to the members of the land trust And to support them in pursuing affordable housing development, were there any barriers that you came across along the way, or any questions or concerns that perhaps required education or other methods to help progress along the path of increasing affordable housing supply in your stock?
Sure. I think there's a couple of things with that. We have our land trust homeowners, and then we also have a community of people who want to be land trust homeowners. And so we haven't been able to keep up with all of the demand. And I think as cities grow, there's going to be more and more demand for permanently affordable housing. And so what we have been able to do over our 36-year history is resell homes again and again affordably. And so that has really helped us, but we have a waiting list that's incredible. And so I think that even as other land trusts are saying, okay, well, maybe we're at our max, are you really ever at your max? Because the scale of affordability is always changing. And so cities are getting more and more expensive. And so you're going to have more people that are in need of affordable housing, even at moderate incomes. I think one of the things that we did to reach out to folks about ADUs is really, once they started seeing them pop up, they started asking, how can we do this? And how can you help us do this? How can you fold this in to the land trust model? And so that attached unit is really how we're going to fold that in. We're just, answering a question for folks. And for existing homeowners, the barrier there is financing. We don't yet have a great answer to how they would get an ADU built without taking equity out of their house. And so that's something, again, that we're exploring. But because the industry here is so new, there haven't been a lot of resales. There aren't a lot of comps. And so we attempted to get everyone on the same page with that virtual conference that I mentioned, not only developers and affordable housing providers, but our appraisal community and our realtors and, insurance folks. Everyone involved with a real estate transaction has to be on the same page before you can sell something or before you can get financing. And so we're still a work in progress here in North Carolina on that front.
Wonderful. I love that you're taking the approach of looking across the entire process of sale and processing of property, right? Because you need to have everybody working together. So the last series of questions I have, I think we'll not be able to dive into it as much as we have the first two questions, but the last questions I do have are if you have any recommendations to ensure that marginalized and lower income households are able to afford rent in the newly created ADU units. And I'll throw that to whoever would like to respond.
I think, you have to be intentional about it. And there's certainly private homeowners who know that there's a housing crisis and want to be intentional about the rents that they set. Obviously, providers will be intentional about how they set rents. But I think one thing that is really important with that is being able to support private property owners who want to provide missing middle housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, and municipalities, nonprofits. We all have to think about how we're going to support them once this unit is built. Like, most people are not very well versed in being a landlord. This is probably their first rental unit. And so not just holding their hand during the construction process, but afterwards, the property management, the filing, the papers for Section 8 or subsidized housing. Like, how do we support them in being landlords of this? And I think that's a question that some areas have answered. And then, some of our, municipalities and other cities, nonprofits haven't answered yet. But we definitely, that's something that I think I would highly recommend. Focus on the after the ADU is built as well.
If I could jump in here, and a great answer, Sherry. And I think in Ontario, we have a unique responsibility in terms of municipalities, because we're what's known as a service manager for housing. And so we work with housing providers, private, nonprofit, municipally owned, to make sure, how are we creating more housing that's affordable to not only middle income groups, but also low income, and thinking about non-market housing like emergency shelters and supportive housing and transitional housing. And so thinking about how can we better work together, but also have plans that we make sure that, that this is the missing middle is part of the picture, which it is, and finding best practices to make sure, okay, how can we work better together to create more options and, partnerships that can help. Once you build that building, partnerships to help place tenants, partnerships to help maintain those units, and those kinds of things. And I think also in terms of affordability, we're having a conversation in Ontario about what does affordability mean, right? And we have an income-based definition that was in the provincial policy, that is in the provincial policy statement. And CMHC has some guidelines around not spending more than 30% of your income, and some new definitions that the minister has said, we're going to have conversations around to make sure that we get it right around what does it mean if we go to a market-based definition of affordability. We know that what might seem, the prices are not as affordable as they once were. And so we need to make sure that we have housing that is affordable to middle income families, but also finding agreements to make sure that it stays affordable as well. And that's, we certainly play a role in that, and work with our partners to do that.
Yeah, I think partnership is really important, and the roles that are defined amongst the team. And circling back to sort of the framework that you're developing for the programs, who the ADU is for and who is it not for, what is the renter population and their needs. So are they multi-generational families? Are they long-term residents? Are they new homeowners in neighborhoods that they might not have been from? And I think in addition to understanding who that population that's being served, and also the ones who are kind of at the creation of the housing itself, being really mindful about the impact that is intended. So is the goal to have an anti-displacement strategy? Are you reducing overcrowding? Are you wanting or aiming for homeowners to be able to build equity? And sometimes it's helpful. It was helpful during our pilot program that we were focusing on so many different goals, but they were competing at times. And so when we were working with marginalized homeowners, their goals might not have been to rent to Section 8, might be to rent to family, and you can't rent to family with Section 8. Or it might be that they really liked the one-stop shop sort of aspect of it. But they wanted a little bit more flexibility on like the designs of the unit itself, because we offered pre-designed units. And so for us, affordable rental looked like the Section 8 program, but for homeowners who engaged us in the process, affordable rent looked something more like families with informal income, or those who kind of were resource sharing. And that there was a program, this program wasn't necessarily a fit for them, but they had the qualifications that would have been better suited by kind of a restructuring of the program in that way. And I think that defining those roles and the who is it for and how are you doing it is going to be really important for an iteration of the Backyard Homes program, because we were so widespread in that impact of what it was that the pilot really couldn't address every single thing around the housing crisis, and needs more to be more specific around the community-based organizations that are really close to the communities that they're providing for. And
Thank you so much, Chaz. So, hearing from your responses, it's becoming really clear to me that the importance of collaboration, right? We have to know what is our true strength and how can we play to that strength to deliver the greatest impact, and then to rely on communities and other folks in the sector to contribute what they have to contribute, right? So thank you so much for your responses. I understand that Tamina has been very carefully watching the Q&A, so she has a question to ask you now.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so there's been a couple questions that's been pulling in the Q&A. I think there's a lot of favorite ones, but the top one that had 10 votes by an anonymous attendee: affordable housing is a wonderful concept. Who will be policing the affordability piece? A homeowner gets an ADU fast tracked, they don't pay DCs, etc. But what stops them from charging above market for the space? Anyone want to answer?
I can start on this one in terms of just expanding on some of what I spoke to. So when we think about affordability in Ontario and across, we think about the first to sixth income decile. So when you think of incomes across, divided into 10, fourth to sixth is the middle income households, and 1 to 3 is considered lower income. And so those are the families, the households that we're thinking about when we're thinking about affordable housing. So we have specific metrics that we look at that's consistent with provincial policy. And I did reference that conversation, and that new definitions are coming out. And so really when we say something is affordable, we look at, okay, if you had an income, what would it mean that you could afford if it was no more than 30% of your income? So in Peel, it's just under 500,000 for a home ownership that someone at the highest end of a middle income household could afford. And so that gives you a clear metric if something is affordable or not, based on, and then you can drill down based on dwelling types and etc. In terms of how do you keep it affordable, so we have some initiatives that are municipal, but also provincially supported as well, that we look at affordability period. And so we have agreements that when people when developments make contributions or there's incentives to not only make sure that it's affordable, but to keep it affordable. So for 25 years or longer. And so, so that's how we work to do that, because we want to make sure that this housing stays affordable and that people who need it have it.
Thank you, Paul. Sherry or Cass?
So for our program, we're going to be very hands-on. And so since we're doing the property management, we'll make sure, we'll of course verify the income of the tenant, but we're going to make sure that the ADU is leased to someone who is 60% AMI or below, and that's based on their household size. It's similar metric to 30% of your income. So that's how we're going to do it, and that kind of takes the homeowner out of it. It takes that responsibility off of them, but also we know we're hitting the target, right? As far as there doesn't need to be any policing because we're going to make sure it's done on the front end.
Okay, and the last question I see here with 5 votes. Can ADUs comfortable provide housing for a family? Many of the images of garden suites and laneway suites appear to show a maximum of 2-bedroom units, which cannot compete with suburban homes for comfort in families. Is there a way to help support comfortable and livable options for multi-general families through missing middle options? Are there any good case studies to demonstrate this? Thank you. Who wants to take that one on?
I can certainly start, I guess, on that. In terms of, we want to look at different housing options. So an ARU may be a really good option for, as I mentioned, for someone who has a caregiver or a grandparent who wants to live in the second unit. But we also have initiatives that support family size units, and we constantly make sure that, hey, where there's a need for family size units, whether that be in apartments or whether that be in townhomes or other missing middle housing, it's important that we make sure that those happen. So we have housing targets. We also have incentives programs that provide an incentive to provide those units. But we also work with industry to make sure that where there is a need, that we do our best to provide those units so that larger households do have an affordable place to go. And so we have an incentives pilot that is specifically focused on that, recognizing that there is a need for more family-sized units. But it's not just that initiative that supports that, but broader policies and certainly working with our nonprofit and private industry partners to make sure that housing is more available.
And I'd like to add that I think it also depends on your municipality, how large the ADUs can be by code. In places where they can be 1,200 square feet, you could comfortably fit a 3-bedroom if the parcel itself can handle that. So it also depends on the parcel size as well, where it's going to be built. So, but in a lot of places, 800 square feet is the maximum. But in California, some of the, it's 1,200 square feet, and so it just really depends on a lot of different factors. Sometimes it's just the parcel size that limits how big the unit can be itself.
Yeah, I think that one of the aspects of who the ADUs are for our program, we were looking at independent adults who had like proximity to supportive services that were needed when they were on the Section 8 program. And I think that for them, their housing needs or housing needs for folks who are aging in place, or for seniors, it had been a really good option to create these standalone like 1-bedroom studio units in the backyard, which were in pretty close proximity to the front yard, where the main homeowner in the program had this new neighbor or this new sharing of space that they had. I think that when we think of designing for multi-generational families or for the ability for like other family members to come in and out of like the property over time, it makes me think a little bit about the low-rise competition that the city of Los Angeles had put on, where there were different series of topics, but it's essentially 1 to 2 lots that people are redeveloping or reimagining into what the single family neighborhoods look like when you're sharing space with folks. How close do you get to each other? How does that change over time, and addressing the needs of if you have a growing family, or if you have folks who are more on like the like independent adults living together. So,
Paul, I know you have your hand up. You can take
Sure,
the floor.
I saw a question around students and how do you make sure you have more housing for students. And so we have an initiative, and I know it's in other municipalities as well, called Peel Home Share. And so what it does is it pairs up, it could be a student with a senior who is living on their own, and they get reduced rent if they are speaking, having social interaction, taking the garbage, things like that, helping out, and in exchange for that they get reduced rent. So that's an initiative that is one piece trying to create more housing options and affordable housing options, but also certainly working with our colleges and universities to make sure that we have housing options for students who are attending those schools. And I do want to say, like, in terms of municipalities and regulations and permissions and those kinds of things, there are studies going on right now and policies that will be put forward this year and in the future around how can we make sure that we can have duplexes, triplexes, laneway suites, garden suites, more permissive, and where do they work? And I read a question around lot sizes and that kind of thing, because not every community is the same, and we know that there are different housing needs across communities. So where are those opportunities, and how do we make sure that those those housing options can happen, so that if people want to create that housing and further densify, that we do so, and then we have, you know, the infrastructure and services to support it, and then create more housing options in communities where people want to live. And that's the point, is that we want places where everyone can say, I want to live this in community, and I have a housing option that allows me to live there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. There was tons of questions, and thank you everyone for sending your questions. We've captured them for the report that will go out, in soon times. We're going to end on time. So on behalf of ULI Toronto School of Cities and City Building TMU, I want to thank Kaz, Sherry, and Paul for speaking today, and all our speakers throughout the week. Thank you, Michael Piper, Karen Chappell, Sharice Berta, and Cheryl Case for moderating this week. It's been great to hear everyone's perspectives. I've learned, we talked about bylaws and building codes and cost-effective designs for the missing little housing supply, and ADUs. Never heard of ADUs before, so this is great. So please be sure to check out our upcoming events for this this week. Happening tonight, February 9th, you can attend an in-person book talk that our partner of School of Cities is organizing, featuring Vineet Mukia and his new book, Remaking the American Dream, that discusses the informal and formal transformational of single-family housing units. And that link will be in the chat. With that, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.